The wind moaned through the pine trees surrounding Arlo Bennett's remote mountain cabin, a constant companion that had long ago ceased to be unsettling. Tonight, however, the sound carried a different note, higher, more urgent, as dark clouds rolled across the perpetually overcast sky. The cabin itself stood as a testament to self-sufficiency. Wind turbines with their slowly rotating blades and solar panels that caught what little sunlight filtered through the dense canopy powered his modest existence. Arlo moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who had lived alone for years. His calloused hands adjusted the lamp on his rough-hewn table, the warm glow illuminating pages of a letter he would never send. This was his nightly ritual, penning thoughts to people he'd left behind, confessions and observations that would remain forever unsaid, tucked away in a wooden box beneath his cot. "Not much to report today," he muttered to himself as his pen scratched across the paper. "Fixed the turbine's worn gears again. Third time this month." Outside, a flash of russet fur darted between trees. The stray fox he'd named Ember, though he'd never admit to naming a wild animal. Arlo watched as the creature paused at the edge of his small vegetable garden, ears twitching alertly before disappearing into the underbrush. He'd leave scraps for it later, as he always did. As twilight deepened into night, the wind picked up, rattling the cabin's shutters like an impatient visitor. Arlo stoked the dying embers in his cast-iron stove, then settled back with a dog-eared copy of Thoreau, a fitting companion for a man who had chosen to live deliberately, away from the complications of society. The irony wasn't lost on him. Unlike Thoreau, his retreat to the woods hadn't been a philosophical experiment, but an escape from unbearable guilt. The first drops of rain pinged against the metal roof, quickly building to a thunderous downpour. Arlo barely glanced up from his book, accustomed to the mountain's temperamental weather. But when a different sound cut through the storm, frantic scratching at his door, desperate and human, he froze, hand instinctively reaching for the hunting rifle propped in the corner. The scratching came again, followed by a thud against the wooden frame. Arlo approached cautiously, peering through a crack in the curtains. Lightning illuminated a crumpled figure on his porch, drenched and motionless. "Damn it," he growled, unbolting the door against his better judgment. The woman collapsed across his threshold the moment the door swung open, rainwater pooling beneath her sodden clothes. Her dark hair clung to a face marked with bruises, and her breathing came in shallow gasps. The tattered jacket she wore bore a faded logo, Northridge Dynamics, partially obscured by mud and what looked disturbingly like blood. Arlo stood frozen, his years of carefully constructed solitude suddenly threatened. He could still close the door, pretend he'd never seen her. The mountain had its own harsh justice. It wasn't his responsibility to intervene. The woman's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and delirious. "Please," she whispered. "They're coming. I have nowhere else to go." Something in her desperate plea broke through Arlo's hesitation, perhaps recognition of another soul pushed to extremes. He made his choice, knowing it might change everything. "Then stay with me," he said, pulling her inside and bolting the door behind them. Arlo worked quickly, his movements economical as he gathered clean rags and his limited medical supplies. The woman, who had managed to whisper that her name was Celia Marlowe before lapsing into semi-consciousness, lay on his narrow cot, shivering despite the blankets he'd piled atop her. "This might sting," he warned, dabbing antiseptic on a particularly nasty gash across her forearm. She hissed, but didn't pull away, her eyes now alert and assessing her surroundings with the wariness of a cornered animal. "Where am I?" she asked, voice raspy. "Nowhere," Arlo replied, fashioning a makeshift bandage. "Which is exactly why you're safe, at least for now." He moved to his small kitchen area, ladling steaming root vegetable stew into a chipped bowl. When he returned, Celia had managed to sit up, though the effort clearly cost her. "Eat," he instructed, setting the bowl beside her. "Then we talk." She eyed the food suspiciously before hunger won out. Between careful spoonfuls, her story emerged in fragments. Northridge Dynamics, a biotech megacorporation where she'd worked as a senior researcher. Unethical experiments, human test subjects, her discovery of violated protocols and decision to gather evidence. The security team sent to contain the situation, a euphemism for silencing her permanently. "I got out with the data," she said, touching a slender device hidden in her boot. "But they've been tracking me for days. I thought the mountains would throw them off. But—" She broke off, glancing nervously toward the window, where rain still lashed against the glass. "No one finds this place unless I want them to," Arlo said with more confidence than he felt. Something in her story resonated uncomfortably with his own past. Corporations prioritizing profit over human life. The powerlessness of individuals against such machinery. He'd seen it firsthand in the mining collapse that took his sister. A mechanical whine, almost imperceptible beneath the storm, made them both freeze. Celia's face drained of what little color it had regained. "Drones," she whispered. "They use thermal imaging to track body heat through forest canopy." Arlo moved swiftly to the window, catching a glimpse of tiny lights skimming the treetops before disappearing into the darkness. His mind raced, cataloging the cabin's vulnerabilities. The metal roof would stand out on infrared, the solar panels and turbine distinctive from the air. "We need to jam their signals," he muttered, already mentally dismantling his old radio transmitter for parts. Celia watched him with growing interest as he rummaged through a trunk of salvaged electronics. "You're not what I expected," she observed. "And what did you expect from a man living alone on a mountain?" "Someone less prepared." She gestured to the organized workshop corner of his cabin, the shelves of technical manuals. Arlo gave a humorless smile. "I didn't always repair wind turbines. Ms. Marlowe." Working together through the night, they converted his ancient furnace into a rudimentary electromagnetic jammer, powerful enough to create a dead zone around the cabin. It wasn't elegant. The device drained power alarmingly fast and made an unnerving humming sound. But when another drone passed overhead at dawn, it veered off course. Its navigation system scrambled. Their collaboration, however, wasn't without friction. When Arlo stepped outside to fetch water from the hand pump, returning to find Celia brandishing a makeshift weapon fashioned from a broken chair leg, the fragility of their alliance became clear. "I thought," she began, lowering the improvised club. "That I'd turned you in," Arlo finished, setting down the water bucket. "If I wanted you gone, I wouldn't have bothered patching you up." Days passed in uneasy coexistence. Celia's strength returned gradually, though the bruises on her face bloomed in violent purples before fading to sickly yellows. Arlo maintained his routines, tending the garden, repairing equipment, scanning the forest edge for signs of intrusion, but now with the hyper-awareness of someone whose sanctuary had been breached. During a particularly bitter evening, as they huddled near the stove for warmth, Arlo finally shared his own story, the mining corporation that had ignored safety protocols, the collapse that killed 12 workers including his sister, his testimony that was buried beneath corporate lawyers and settlements. His retreat to the mountains wasn't just about grief. It was surrender in a fight he couldn't win. "So you just gave up?" Celia challenged, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "Let them get away with it?" Arlo's jaw tightened. "I call it surviving. Not everyone can be a crusader. Ms. Marlowe." "Celia," she corrected softly. "And sometimes surviving is its own form of resistance." The next morning, while checking the perimeter, they discovered the first microdrone, barely larger than a hummingbird, nestled in the crook of a pine branch. Its camera lens glinted in the weak sunlight, a mechanical eye watching the cabin. "They're getting closer," Celia said, carefully extracting the device without triggering its motion sensors. Back inside, she dismantled it with surprising dexterity, salvaging its core components to fashion a silent alarm system that would alert them to approaching electronics. Their shared purpose forged a tentative trust. Arlo found himself watching Celia's methodical work, admiring the precision of her movements despite her lingering injuries. When she caught him staring, he didn't look away. "What?" she asked. "You remind me of someone," he admitted. "My sister had that same focus when solving problems." Something softened in Celia's expression. "Tell me about her." And so he did. Stories he'd kept bottled inside for years. How Maria had been the family genius, earning her engineering degree while working full-time to support their mother. How she'd believed in improving the system from within, taking the mining company job to implement safer practices. How her last message to him had been full of concerns about corner cutting and ignored warnings. "I should have done more," he concluded, the familiar weight of guilt pressing down. Before it was too late, Celia's hand found his across the table, a brief, startling moment of connection. "Maybe you still can." That night, they attempted to convert an old radio transmitter into a secure communication device, hoping to contact a journalist in the nearest town who might help expose Northridge's crimes. The work was painstaking, frequently interrupted by Celia's coughing fits that grew more concerning as the night wore on. "You're running a fever," Arlo observed, pressing a cool cloth to her forehead. "It'll pass," she insisted, though they both knew her condition was deteriorating, whether from infection or something more sinister. Neither wanted to speculate. Their first transmission attempt failed when a sudden power surge blew out the cabin's main fuse, plunging them into darkness. As Arlo worked to restore power, a metallic thud on the roof made them both freeze. "Another drone?" he whispered. Celia shook her head, eyes wide. "Bigger. They've found us." The blizzard hit without warning the following day. Howling winds driving snow horizontally past the windows. Under normal circumstances, Arlo would have welcomed the storm as an additional barrier between himself and the world. Now, watching Celia struggle to breathe through congested lungs, he cursed the weather that made it impossible to seek medical help. "We need to leave," Celia insisted during a moment of clarity, her eyes bright with fever. "Get down the mountain before they come in force." "In this?" Arlo gestured to the whiteout conditions visible through the frosted window. "We wouldn't make it a mile." "Then we fight," she said with surprising conviction. "Right here." Before Arlo could argue, the lights flickered and died, the wind turbine's governor finally giving out under the storm's battering. In the sudden darkness, the cabin felt smaller, more vulnerable. "They planned this," Celia whispered. "Wait for the storm, kill the power, then move in when we're blind and freezing." Arlo lit the emergency lantern, its glow casting long shadows across the wooden walls. "Then we'd better not be here when they arrive." Working by lantern light, they prepared for the inevitable confrontation. Arlo retrieved his hunting rifle from its hiding place beneath the floorboards, loading it with non-lethal rounds, rubber bullets that would incapacitate without killing. Celia, meanwhile, fashioned a crude stun baton from the components they'd salvaged from the microdrones, capable of delivering an electrical shock to anyone who came too close. "One more thing," Arlo said, leading her to the wind turbine's control panel at the back of the cabin. He'd been modifying it secretly over the past days, guided by Celia's knowledge of circuitry. "If we overload the capacitors and channel the surge through these coils." "An EMP," Celia finished, eyes widening. "You've built an electromagnetic pulse device. It'll fry every piece of electronics within 500 meters, Arlo confirmed. "Including our own. It's a last resort." The sound of rotors cutting through the howling wind reached them before they saw the aircraft. A sleek, black transport helicopter, hovering just above the tree line, its searchlight sweeping across the snow-covered clearing. Figures in tactical gear rappelled down, their movements precise despite the blizzard. 6 of them, Arlo counted, peering through a gap in the shutters. "Armed." Celia pressed herself against the wall beside him, her face pale but determined. "The one in front, That's Marcus Kane, head of Northridge Security. He won't stop until he has me and the data. As if on cue, a voice amplified by a megaphone cut through the storm. Dr. Marlowe, we know you're in there. Come out now, and no one needs to get hurt. Arlo and Celia exchanged glances. They both knew it was a lie. Get ready, Arlo murmured, moving toward the cabin's rear, where the trapdoor to the abandoned miner's tunnel lay hidden beneath a rug. When I give the signal, trigger the EMP, then head for the tunnel. The front door splintered inward with a crash, the lock giving way under a battering ram. Arlo fired 2 warning shots, the rubber bullets embedding themselves in the doorframe inches from the lead operative's head. That's close enough, he shouted. Next one won't miss. Marcus Kane stepped forward, seemingly unconcerned by the threat. His voice carried the practiced calm of someone accustomed to power. You're harboring a fugitive, Mr. Bennett. Yes, we know who you are. The reclusive brother of Maria Bennett, tragic mining accident victim. Northridge Dynamics owns those mines now. We could make things right for you. The casual mention of his sister's name, the implied offer of blood money, ignited something primal in Arlo's chest. Now! He yelled to Celia. She flipped the switch on the turbine control panel. For a heartbeat. Nothing happened. Then, a wave of energy pulsed outward, accompanied by a deep, subsonic thrum that Arlo felt in his bones. Every electronic device in the cabin died instantly. Lights, radio, the space heater in the corner. Outside, the operatives' communications equipment sparked and failed, their night vision goggles going dark. In the confusion that followed, the cabin erupted into chaos. Disoriented operatives stumbled through unfamiliar territory, their tactics compromised without technology. Arlo used his knowledge of every creaking floorboard to move silently, disarming one man with a swift strike from behind. Celia, meanwhile, found herself cornered by Marcus Kane, who had anticipated the EMP and removed his electronics beforehand. He advanced on her with cold determination, a combat knife glinting in the dim light filtering through the broken door. The data, Dr. Marlowe, he demanded. Then perhaps a quick end, rather than what awaits back at the facility. There won't be any facility left when I'm done, Celia spat, brandishing her makeshift stun baton. The world will know what happened there. Kane lunged forward, faster than she anticipated. The knife slashed across her arm, drawing a fresh line of blood. She staggered backward, her weakened state betraying her as her legs hit the edge of the cot and she tumbled onto it. Kane stood over her, knife raised for a killing blow, when Arlo crashed into him with the full force of his body, driving them both across the room and into the wall. The impact knocked the wind from both men, the knife clattering to the floor. What followed was brutal and desperate. A hand-to-hand struggle between Kane's military precision and Arlo's raw survival instinct. They grappled in the semi-darkness, overturning furniture, blood smearing across floorboards. When Kane's fingers closed around Arlo's throat, squeezing with methodical pressure, spots danced across Arlo's vision. In that moment of extremity, Arlo accessed the rage he'd suppressed for years, not just for himself, but for his sister, for Celia, for everyone crushed beneath corporate power. With a roar that tore from somewhere deep inside, he broke Kane's grip and delivered a devastating series of blows that left the operative unconscious. "Arlo!" Celia's urgent voice cut through his haze. "We need to go, now!" The EMP had done its work. The corporate team lay incapacitated or disarmed throughout the cabin, their high-tech advantage neutralized. Arlo kicked aside the rug covering the trapdoor, revealing the entrance to the mining tunnel below. He helped Celia down the ladder, then followed, pulling the trapdoor shut above them. The tunnel stretched before them, a relic from an earlier era when the mountain had been systematically hollowed for its mineral wealth. Emergency lanterns, safely stored in lead-lined boxes that protected them from the EMP, provided just enough light to navigate by. 2 miles to the eastern slope, Arlo explained, supporting Celia as they moved deeper into the earth. There's an old ranger station there. If we're lucky, someone might be manning it despite the storm. They had covered perhaps half that distance when Celia collapsed, her fever spiking dangerously. Arlo gathered her in his arms, alarmed at the heat radiating from her skin. "Leave me," she mumbled, eyes unfocused. "You can move faster alone." "Not happening," Arlo replied, voice gruff to mask his fear. He carried her to a small alcove where miners had once taken breaks, setting her down gently before unpacking their meager supplies. The antibiotics he'd salvaged from his first aid kit were probably expired, but he coaxed them into her nonetheless, following with precious sips of clean water. "Why?" Celia asked, between chattering teeth. "Why risk everything for a stranger?" Arlo busied himself adjusting the thermal blanket around her shoulders. "You're not a stranger anymore." "But you hate people," she persisted, a hint of her usual sharpness returning. "You hate the world. Your whole existence is about hiding from it." "Maybe I was wrong," Arlo admitted, the words difficult after years of certainty. "Or maybe hiding and running away are different things." Celia's laugh turned into a cough. "So philosophical in a crisis." "Learned from the best," he said, thinking of Maria's endless ethical debates. "Rest now. We move when you're stronger." But as the hours passed in the dim tunnel, Celia's condition worsened. Arlo fought his growing panic, applying cold compresses made from melted snow carried in his canteen, checking her pulse with fingers that refused to remain steady. "Tell me about what happens after," he said, trying to keep her conscious and focused. "When we get the data out, what changes?" Through cracked lips, Celia painted a vision of accountability. Corporations reined in by public outrage, test subjects compensated, reforms implemented. It sounded naive to Arlo's cynical ears, yet her conviction was infectious. "You don't believe it's possible," she observed, seeing the doubt in his expression. "I believe you believe it," he replied. "That counts for something." They argued then, a strangely normalized exchange in their abnormal circumstances, him insisting that systems were too entrenched to change, her countering that inaction guaranteed failure. Their debate was interrupted by a sound that froze them both, footsteps echoing through the tunnel behind them. "They found the entrance," Arlo whispered, reaching for his rifle only to remember he'd emptied it during the cabin confrontation. Celia struggled to sit up. "The data is in my boot. Take it, run." "We're beyond splitting up," Arlo said firmly, positioning himself between her and the approaching threat. He picked up a rusty mining tool leaning against the wall, a pathetic weapon, but better than nothing. The footsteps grew louder, accompanied by the beam of a flashlight sweeping the tunnel walls. Arlo tensed, preparing for one final, hopeless stand. "Hello," called a voice that belonged to neither Northridge operative nor corporate security. "Is someone down here?" A figure emerged from the darkness, a middle-aged woman in a forest ranger's uniform, her weathered face creased with concern. "Sweet Jesus," she exclaimed, taking in their battered appearance. "What happened to you folks?" "Gale?" Arlo recognized the ranger who occasionally patrolled the mountain's eastern slopes. "How did you find us?" Ranger Gale Storm, a name that had inspired good-natured ribbing throughout her career, lowered her flashlight. "Got a strange radio signal from this direction. All static except for the words, 'help' and 'tunnel.' Figured I'd check the old mining entrance since the storm was letting up." She knelt beside Celia, professional assessment replacing shock. "She needs a doctor. Real one. Not mountain first aid." "There are people after her," Arlo warned. "Corporate mercenaries. They're in my cabin, probably regrouping by now." Gale's expression hardened. "On my mountain? Not for long." She unclipped the radio from her belt. "I've got a snowcat at the tunnel entrance and backup on the way. As for your uninvited guests, The storm cut off the only road down. They're not going anywhere. True to her word, Gale led them to the waiting snowcat, its treads designed to navigate the treacherous winter landscape. Celia, bundled in emergency blankets, drifted in and out of consciousness as they made their slow descent toward civilization. "Your radio call," Arlo said suddenly, remembering. "We never got the transmitter working. The EMP would have fried it anyway." Celia's eyes fluttered open. "Backup battery," she murmured. "Rewired while you were checking the perimeter yesterday. Just in case." Arlo stared at her in disbelief, then broke into unexpected laughter, the first real laughter he'd experienced in years. "You are something else, Dr. Marlowe." At the ranger station, paramedics were waiting to transport Celia to the nearest hospital. Before they loaded her into the ambulance, she gripped Arlo's hand with surprising strength. "The data," she reminded him. "It has to reach the right people." "It will," he promised. "I'll make sure of it." She searched his face, finding whatever reassurance she needed. "You're coming back to your cabin after?" The question caught him off guard. The cabin had been his refuge, his fortress against a world he'd rejected. Now it felt like a half-life, a hiding place rather than a home. "I don't know," he answered honestly. Days later, when Celia had been stabilized and the worst of the infection had passed, Arlo visited her hospital room, bringing a small potted pine seedling as his awkward offering. She sat propped against pillows, her color much improved, scrolling through news reports on a tablet. "It's breaking," she said by way of greeting, turning the screen toward him. Headlines blared about Northridge Dynamics, whistleblower allegations, and federal investigations. The journalist published everything. "There's talk of congressional hearings." Arlo nodded, setting the seedling on her windowsill. "Your corporate friends have been taken into custody. Turns out attacking a federal forest ranger's station adds some serious charges." "And Marcus Kane?" "Singing like a canary, according to Gale. Seems his loyalty had limits after all." A comfortable silence settled between them, filled with the beeping of medical equipment and distant hospital sounds. Finally, Celia asked the question that hung unspoken. "What will you do now?" Arlo gazed out the window at the town below, a place of people and connections he'd avoided for so long. "The cabin's still standing. Needs some repair after the firefight, but it's salvageable." "That's not what I asked." He met her eyes, reading the invitation there. "I thought I might wait until the snow melts. Head into town more often. Maybe even send those letters I've been writing." Celia's smile was worth every moment of danger they'd faced. "I'm being discharged next week. Doctor says I need rest, clean air, somewhere quiet to recover." "I know a place," Arlo said, returning her smile with his own tentative version. "Bit remote. Owner's a recluse, but he's working on that." When the time came for Celia to leave the hospital, Arlo was waiting with Gale's borrowed truck. The journey back up the mountain was slow, the road still partially blocked by snow, despite the spring thaw beginning in the valley below. At the cabin, repairs were underway, new windows installed, the splintered door replaced, bullet holes patched in the walls. Inside, Arlo had cleared space on his bookshelves for Celia's few possessions, added a second chair to the table, expanded the vegetable garden to include herbs she'd mentioned enjoying. That evening, as they shared a simple meal by the firelight, Celia wrote an email address on a scrap of paper, the journalist who wanted to interview her once she was stronger. Arlo added it to the box containing his unsent letters, now with the intention of actually mailing them. "The world's still out there," Celia observed, watching him close the box. "Still broken in all the ways that drove us both away." "Yes," Arlo agreed. "But maybe we don't have to face it alone anymore." As dawn broke the next morning, they stepped outside into crisp, clear air. The storm had scoured the sky clean, revealing a brilliant blue expanse above the pines. Ember, The fox watched curiously from the tree line as the two humans stood side by side, surveying the wilderness that had both sheltered and challenged them. Celia's hand found Arlo's, her fingers intertwining with his. "I don't have to go anywhere else," she said softly. Arlo squeezed her hand, accepting the connection and all it implied. "Then stay with me." Together, they walked down the winding forest path, their footprints marking the fresh snow, two sets now, where for so long there had been only one. Behind them, the cabin waited, no longer a fortress against the world, but a sanctuary within it, its door unlocked for the first time in years.